On problems number 1 and 2, you're supposed to be identifying each line or segment that intersects each circle. So on number 1, when you're identifying a chord, remember a chord has to be a segment and the endpoints of the segment have to be on the circle. So these two are both lines since they have arrows at the end, and we're not given these specific points to even name the chord that's part of that secant right there. So the only chord that we can name is actually the diameter, because this is the only segment we see whose endpoints we are given the names of, which are points G and F. So for the chord, you can name it segment FG, or you could name it segment GF. You do not have to name it both names. One or the other will do. On the secant, remember a secant can be a segment, it could be a ray, it can be a line. It just has to contain 2 points on the circle. So the chord could also be a secant. You could have FG, segment FG, or segment GF for your answer here too. But you have another secant as well, and that's this line here that goes through the circle in these 2 points. We're not given points on this line, so we have to name it by its scripted letter there, and I'm not sure if you can tell what that is, but it's a cursive L. So when you name it by a scripted letter, you have to use the word line, and then name it with that scripted letter, which in this case is an L. So that would be line L. If you name it with the segments, then use the segment bar and the endpoints. If you name it using its name, then you use the word line and then that scripted letter. A tangent can be a segment, a ray, or a line that only contains 1 point of the circle. And so we only have one choice here for our option, and that's this line right here that only touches the circle in 1 point. Again, we're not given points on the line, we're only given this scripted letter. So again, we have to use the word line and then that scripted letter M. So that's the first note I have down here at the bottom, that when naming a line with a scripted letter, you have to use the word line, not a symbol for line. So you can't say line M with a symbol. That would be incorrect. You have to use the word line. When naming a line with 2 points on the line, you can use the symbol for a line, but you can't name a line with just 1 point. So we'll look at that over here. So again, a chord has to be a segment, and it has to have its endpoints on the circle. Well, you can see the only segment we have here is the radius. This is not a chord because this endpoint of that segment is not on the circle. So the only option we have is to look at the secant, which we're given 2 points of, point L and point M. So part of that line is the segment that starts at L and ends at point M. So when we name the chord, remember it has to be a segment. So we have the segment bar, and we can say it starts with point L and ends with point M, or we could name it segment ML, either one. You're not saying the line is the chord, you're only saying the segment that starts at point L and ends at point M is. Now the secant, remember a chord is a secant. Secants can be segments, can be rays, they can be lines that contain 2 points on the circle. So you could have these as your secant as well. That's the same exact thing. Or remember, secants can be rays or lines. So this whole line contains 2 points on the circle. So we could say ray LM starting at L and going forever in the direction of M. We could say ray ML starting at M and going forever in the direction of L. Or we could say line LM. And the direction of those letters doesn't matter. So line ML would be the same exact thing. So we can use the symbol here, but we've got to name it using 2 points on the line. These are not scripted letters. Those are points, L and M. So if you name it using the symbol, you have to use 2 points to name the line. So any of those 6 answers would be correct on the secant. A tangent can be a segment, a ray, or a line that contains 1 point on the circle. So we're looking at this as being our tangent right here. So we have options on how to name it. Now again, these are points, M and N. Those are not scripted letters like on number 1. So when we name this, if we wanted to say it's the segment MN, we could. that is a tangent, a tangent segment, and again the order of the letters doesn't matter, so either one of those would be a tangent. We could say that it's a ray. You could say it's a ray that starts at M and goes forever in the direction of N, or starts at N and goes forever in the direction of M. Or you could name the line, so use the symbol for line and the 2 points in any order, MN or NM. Any of those would work for the tangent because it could be a segment, a ray, or a line. So we talked about the first 2 points on here. Remember, a chord must be a segment, so for these you don't have any other option but to name it with a segment bar and the endpoints. And then number 4, secants and tangents can be segments, rays, or lines. If you only have a scripted letter, remember you must use the word line when you're naming it, just like we did on this problem here.